This is episode 563 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am pleased to be joined by John Decker. He is president of the Viante Foundation, and that is a organization based in New Mexico that works on government accountability issues, and we'll certainly find out a little bit more about Viante Foundation. But first and foremost, John, welcome to the Tipping Point New Mexico show.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's great to be here.
Yeah, good to have you. And before we get into the issues that we're going to cover revolving around New Mexico's attorney generals and transparency in hiring and contracting with outside legal services. Let's find out about yourself and the Viante Foundation. First and foremost, what is Viante Foundation?
Sure. Well, Viante Foundation was founded in 2017 by conservative business leader Dale Armstrong in Albuquerque in order to promote more transparency in government, better schools, safer neighborhoods, kind of these kitchen table core consensus issues that people, regardless of political party, believe in, and sort of these eternal values that people hold dear. And so he founded the organization in 2017 with a focus exclusively on the state of New Mexico, which is where we're based out of in Albuquerque. This year, we also launched a new 501c3, the Viante Foundation, to add a little national emphasis to our program as well, too. We like to say that the Viante Foundation promotes the same things that Viante New Mexico does, except that we just go wherever we can make a difference, wherever we see a fight that we feel is sort of on the margin, and where we can maybe tip the scales to kind of help weigh in on it. We try to do our part. My colleague Sarah Jane Allen's been very active and promoting for school choice in the state of Texas. They just recently called a special session, which unfortunately didn't go as we had hoped, but the Viante Foundation is active in promoting school choice, safer neighborhoods, more economic opportunity, and greater transparency, really wherever we feel we can make an impact.
And tell us a little bit about yourself and what got you to working for Viante.
Yeah, well, prior to working at Viante, I was the executive director of an organization called the Committee to Unleash Prosperity, an organization that I founded in 2015, along with Steve Forbes, Larry Kudlow, Art Laffer, and Steve Moore, kind of the original Reagan-era supply-siders. And we founded that organization back then to promote supply-side economic policies and those teachings. And I had a great time serving as their executive director for a period of 8 years. But one day, a colleague of mine informed me that a guy named Dale Armstrong out in New Mexico was looking to hire a new president for his Viante organization, and also establish a Viante Foundation on a national basis as well. And wanted to see if I'd be interested in throwing my hat in the ring. And I did a Google search on Dale Armstrong, came up with some Albuquerque Journal articles. And Dale had a program that he does for his workers at TLC called TLC University, basically a program that he started to provide basic lessons of financial literacy, planning for retirement, understanding taxes, importance of a credit score, things like that, basic financial literacy to his employees. And I was just sort of drawn to that. And I thought, like, wow, what a wonderful guy. In the same way that he's providing that sort of TLC University program to his employees, many of these skills I'm just starting to learn now at 33. Shamefully, I thought there should be something like that. Maybe we could take a program like that and marry it to economics, and we could create a new program sort of for supply side economics, but that's more geared towards that just basic level. And my personal passion in life is just trying to get some kind of grand economic consensus, because I think that if that was ever achieved for humanity, it would mean that we would have, an agreement on the basis for what drives human progress. And that would be something pretty amazing. So my hope for Viante is I can take something like a TLC University, marry it to sort of the wonky supply side economics doctrine, and we can create a program that's sort of geared towards expanding basic economic teachings and the same way that he's expanding sort of basic financial literacy teachings, and making sure that we get that information to those who benefit the most from it.
Great. Well, Dale's certainly a leader in New Mexico, and a conservative voice for open government and good government in the state. So you wrote an op-ed recently that appeared in the Santa Fe New Mexican, and it deals with, well, the title was "Don't Let AG's Office Hide Contracts from the Public." Uh, and then you reference a state ethics commission advisory opinion uh, relating to these contracts, which the previous Attorney General Balderas. So we're mostly talking here about Hector Balderas, that he entered into contracts with outside law firms on a contingency basis, um, and whether they're subject to the procurement code of the state of New Mexico and some other issues relating to these lawsuits. And then we'll get to a response that Balderas wrote. But tell us the issue as you see it.
Sure, and thank you for the opportunity to dive more into that piece. I think that the first issue is what Viante is really trying to do is spotlight these contingency contract arrangements in general, and we're kind of raising the question of, we want to bring this to the public's attention because we think that this is something that just deserves more scrutiny to begin with. Basically, with these contingency contracts, contingency meaning that the Attorney General hires an outside law firm. They conduct an investigation, and if they recoup damages, then essentially they petition the court for a percentage of whatever damages they recover. Now, Hector Balderas engaged in a lot of these, in particular, and of course, the Ethics Commission just found that those are subject to the procurement code. We'll put that aside for right now, but that just basically means it's subject to a certain ethical standard in the bidding process. But the Attorney General, Hector Balderas, engaged in a lot of these contingency contracts through a law firm known as Robles, Rial, and Anaya. And Marcus Rial, who's a partner in that law firm, also happens to be a longtime friend of Hector Balderas, going back to their law school years together. And in addition to that, too, Marcus Rial was one of Hector Balderas' largest campaign contributors. Where this gets a little murky is so that Marcus Rial's law firm receives all these contingency fee contracts based on from Hector Balderas, including complex water litigation, Texas versus New Mexico, a case that has a lot of potential to go before the Supreme Court, and a case where some argue that the Marcus Rial's law firm just did not have experience with water litigation nearly sufficient to be taking on such a case, and yet they're awarded this this multi-million-dollar contract. So that's one case. There was also an opioid litigation case too, where the state of New Mexico opted out of a national settlement related to a national opioid settlement. And New Mexico elected to conduct their own investigation, but paid this Marcus Rial's law firm again a contingency fee that's roughly 3 times what other states paid for similar litigation on their end. And then on top of that too, Viante has conducted its own investigation looking into some of these contingency fee contracts using the Inspection of Public Records Request Act. We found a contract that went from Hector Balderas to Marcus Rial's law firm that basically said that this is to investigate any entity in the state of New Mexico that has caused consumer or environmental harm. Viante argues that scope of work is inappropriately broad. And if you don't know what you're investigating or who you're investigating, then what are you doing? It just sounds like a fishing expedition. A contract like that is written to be just sort of carte blanche to conduct any investigation you want, and then through these contingency fee agreements, petition the court for whatever damages that you can find. So Viante is making the case that this deserves a higher level of scrutiny than it had. And there's another contract too related to the automotive industry. Again, contingency fee kind of thing. We argue that the scope of work is overly broad. But what's really important to us is there was actually an independent investigation that was conducted into Hector Balderas based on his relationship with this outside law firm. We're not the first people to sort of raise red flags on this. And the results of that internal investigation are currently being blocked right now by the new AG's office. So we're hoping that they will reconsider their decision. They have used something called the audit rule to deny us the results of that. basically saying, but we're basically saying that there is considerable public interest at this point in light of how many contracts this law firm was granted on that contingency fee basis, and in light of the State Ethics Commission's recent finding that there's a certain high bar through the procurement standards of there's certainly a higher ethical bar than what we believe was used to when dishing out these contracts in the first place. And we've also sent subsequent IPRA requests to the state of New Mexico because Hector Balderas made a statement in reporting that before he gave out this contingency fee contract on the opioid litigation, he claims that there was a competitive bidding war for it. And we have asked the state of New Mexico to show its homework on that. So I won't rush to conclusions on what that's going to show, but I can say that they have started providing documents from that IPRA request, and we're not satisfied that we have been shown anything resembling a competitive bidding process to date. But we will give New Mexico more time before we rush into any conclusion on that.
So kind of to take a slight step back, the Attorney General's office here in New Mexico, and this is, I don't know, you can tell me how common this is across the country, but they, of course, have teams of attorneys that are involved in all variety of litigation. Sometimes that's kind of basic criminal litigation on high profile or tough cases involving, maybe large criminal operations or the like. Other times they are involved in litigation against, say, corporations that may have done something that the state of New Mexico takes issue with. And one of the recent cases, and something that Balderas maybe responded to or responded to criticism involving the opioid lawsuits. This is where the opioid manufacturing companies were essentially downplaying the risks of opioid addiction. The state of New Mexico and numerous other states sued and got a significant payout from the companies. Now, is that emblematic of these lawsuits where there may be expert knowledge that was required that they didn't have in-house, as Balderas seems to indicate in his opinion piece? Or is this system of going outside the Attorney General's office itself and hiring and contracting with attorneys across the country, or those who might be personal friends of the Attorney General, is that a commonplace occurrence, not just here in New Mexico, but across the country?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that first, I would say that there's nothing unprecedented about the contracts that Hector Balderas engaged in. There's nothing unprecedented about it. But what Viante's foundation is making the case about, going to your earlier point, did the Rael, Robles, Anaya law firm, did they have some kind of specialized expertise that really helped with that opioid case? Well, I'm sure that they would certainly make the case that they do. I would point to just sort of the overall pattern that I'm seeing as I'm looking at this, which is that they also received the contingency fee contract for the Texas versus New Mexico water case, where it's been heavily speculated that they had nowhere near the amount of experience necessary to be taking on that sort of complex litigation. There's been all sorts of red flags that have been raised about the fact that they didn't have experience arguing before the Supreme Court, that they didn't necessarily have a lot of experience on water litigation. So I would say that taken together, one of these cases in and of itself, maybe they did have some particular expertise that was very valuable. But it just gets troubling when you just notice a pattern that comes down to this law firm receiving a lot more contracts than other law firms, a pattern that goes to, and also a pattern that extends all the way to just even the scope of work that this law firm is getting. Again, going back to a contract that we found that was so vague that it's just to investigate entities for consumer and environmental harm. You could make a case probably that a Dairy Queen did that somewhere. So those, I think that if you're investigating something, or if an Attorney General wants to investigate something and he wants to hire an outside law firm to dig into it, they should be very specific about what that investigation is for. I'm very curious to hear what Hector Balderas would say, that investigation, to probe any entity for consumer environmental harm, what that investigation was actually supposed to green light, he was actually green lighting to conduct.
So, is the issue transparency then, and the concern of potential, uh, I guess, self-dealing or even corruption here in terms of uh, hiring on contingency basis by the previous Attorney General, uh, personal friends and people who are donating to his campaign? That seems to be the fundamental problem here that you're pointing out.
Yes, I think it's transparency, and I also think too that that whatever the standards are for these contingency fee contracts, I think that we really need to be really specific about it, and just from an ethical standpoint, what the rules of the road are for that, and that's something that would again be very helpful if the new Attorney General would release the results of their independent investigation. I presume that they looked into this at some point, when Hector Balderas was under an internal investigation for these contracts to that law firm. We want to see the results of that. And again, and we think that we should, in light of the State Ethics Commission finding that essentially asserted that there is a certain ethical bar with these in the procurement process for these contracts. We want to see that homework, because right now those rules of the road aren't very clear to us, just based on the actions that we've seen from within the Attorney General's office.
So this is obviously related to the previous Attorney General. Balderas is no longer in office. We have a new Attorney General here in New Mexico, and Raul Torres. I'm understanding from your what you're saying here that Torres, you would like him to be more cooperative in specifically highlighting or providing transparency in terms of what's going on with these attorneys, especially under the previous administration there at the Attorney General's office. What kind of responses are you getting from Raul Torres, both in terms of the policy itself and going out on contingency with these outside the agency attorneys, and in terms of the previous AG Balderas?
Well, so far, they have been responsive to our inspection of public records requests acts. We still do not have all the documents that we have sought. I understand that some of this takes time, and so I won't rush into any judgment on that front, but I will still say that we are waiting on AG Torres's office to provide us. Well, one, we're hoping that he's going to provide us with the independent investigation into Hector Balderas, or what the rationale was for allowing these contingency contracts to take place under the old regime. But two, the other thing is, Hector Balderas has now stated publicly that there was a competitive bidding process in place for some of these contingency contracts, and in particular the opioid litigation one. So we have recently filed an inspection of public records request asking to see Hector Balderas' homework on that. We have started to receive documents again, but nothing yet that would suggest that had taken place. I won't rush to judgment there. We'll wait and see what they come back with. But we certainly hope that the current Attorney General will be very responsive in prioritizing that request as well, too, because as the State Ethics Commission findings show, these contingency basis contracts are still subject to a higher ethical standard. The reason being for that, by the way, what the State Ethics Commission said is that contingency fee contracts, ultimately the state of New Mexico is the client. So if you're paying some outside law firm at a rate that's way higher, even though the money is coming from some other source, whether it be a corporation or whoever you're suing, at the end of the day, that is still New Mexico's taxpayer money. So if some outside law firm is charging a rate that's, say, like in the case of the opioid litigation, 3 times what the average state pays, for similar litigation, then that raises ethical concerns. And so we would like to know how those rules are being applied out in New Mexico, and we would certainly welcome any clarification from Attorney General Torres on that as well.
Excellent. Well, where to next? It seems like this is highly contingent on Raul Torres agreeing or working with you. Even the Ethics Commission, which we have separate issues with, just their whole approach and the way they seem to pick and choose the cases that they take a stand on. They really don't have a lot of enforcement power. Are you prepared to litigate if you're not satisfied with the response, or where do you go with this? And also, there are open government organizations like the Foundation for Open Government located here in New Mexico that work here. They tend to take a somewhat, I don't know, narrow in a certain way view of what deserves the activities of an open government organization. But this would seem like a pretty bipartisan issue that could get a lot of good government sort of groups on board. But kind of where do you see things heading with regard to those two comments?
Yeah, well, I think that we're going to let the process play out. We still have a lot of open public records requests, and we're not going to rush into any judgments on our end of what is or isn't there from the state of New Mexico's end. So we'll let the chips fall where as they may. We wanted to bring our findings, our current findings, to light in light of the State Ethics Commission's report that they released, their findings that they released. It just seemed like a good time for us to come out and say, hey, we also found this contract that showed this crazy broad scope of work. So maybe people should actually take a look at this. But I think, to your point, yeah, we would certainly welcome the idea to partner with any other groups that are involved in doing similar work on transparency. And if they have any interest in our findings, we'd certainly like to reach out to them. So I thank you for your suggestion, and we'll make sure to do that.
Great. Well, Viante has been around for a while, but if I can say, Viante previously had a much more kind of modest or consensus-driven approach that was highly reliant on getting agreement of its board from a consensus basis. Do you see Viante taking a more confrontational approach to some of the policy issues facing our state? Where do you see the organization moving? This is certainly a good government and open government issue, but you are, in a way, taking on a past Democrat Attorney General, and it's still to be determined what the current Democrat Attorney General will have to say. Of course, if you're going to be active and engaged in any issue in New Mexico, it's going to certainly involve stepping on Democrats' toes, because they control virtually every significant political office in New Mexico. But where do you see Viante going in terms of some of these other issues? Are you going to really hit the transparency issue, or are there other economic and other policy-based issues that you see the organization moving toward? Because you've got things like crime and other aspects of the policy debate on your website.
Yeah, I think that Viante's always sort of existed to promote eternal values that kind of transcend party lines, whether it's better schools, safer neighborhoods, transparency, accountability, lower crime, more economic opportunity. I think that in terms of staying active on those eternal values is something that we will continue to do. I do imagine that we'll probably throw the elbows around a little more than maybe we used to. But I think that we can be equal opportunity offenders on that on both sides too. So just because that we have this one particular attorney general kind of in the crosshairs right now related to these contracts that are extremely lucrative law contracts for the state of New Mexico, I wouldn't put it past us to have similar investigations ongoing against other politicians from both parties. So We will continue to promote the same values that we did before, but I do anticipate that we'll, like I said, throw the elbows around a little harder.
And you mentioned Texas. Now,
Yes.
Texas, as we discussed, was uh, the location for, I guess, another showdown in a series of showdowns they've had within their legislature over school choice. Now, I this is purely just trying to get a grasp on things, because obviously we, as in anybody who cares about liberty and these kinds of policy issues, cares tremendously what happens in every state, especially the rapidly evolving and changing debate over educational choice. Unfortunately, in New Mexico here, while we do have charter schools, the kind of private school choice that is on the horizon or is within grasp, if you will, although fleeting at this point, uh, certainly doesn't seem to be likely to happen in New Mexico anytime soon. But uh, in your organization, at least your leadership, is heavily focused on New Mexico, including Sarah Jane Allen, who recently appeared on this show. So, how do you exert influence in Texas? Just tell them, don't make the mistakes that we make in New Mexico all the time, or what kind of influence are you trying to achieve in Texas? And are other states on the agenda, or
Mhm.
is it just that educational choice issue because of the salience of that?
Right. Well, it's the education issue. One, it was education's always been part of sort of the Viante portfolio, so it wasn't a novel idea for me to sort of continue to beat that drum when I got the job as president. But I will say we have a fantastic opportunity to do so much more on that front now than we did sort of in the previous iteration of Viante, because we have Sarah Jane Allen on board, who is just such an incredible spokesperson for the school choice issue. Um, Sarah Jane is someone who is a mother of 6 children, including some with special needs, who can really speak to the importance of providing an individual learning path, which school choice obviously excels at providing. And so she's just a great, passionate spokesperson for the issue. And I'm hoping that I can use her voice to help make a difference in whatever school choice fight that we sort of can. I think that the reason why we chose Texas kind of as an early state to kind of to push her out, and she's written so many op-eds on that Texas school choice fight, and she's been placed in the Washington Examiner. She's been placed in Albuquerque Journal, which was mentioning New Mexico too. She's been placed in Issues and Insights, retweeted by Freedom Works, even by Kelly Paul, Senator Rand Paul's wife. So really proud of all the work that Sarah Jane has done on that issue. But we chose Texas because we know that the moment is not quite there in New Mexico yet. We hope that we can get there soon, and we hope that we can be a part of that solution for the state of New Mexico as well. But the iron was just a little closer, a little hotter in Texas. It was a neighboring state. And then, of course, Texas was just important to us because getting school choice in Texas, it's America's second largest state by population. If you get it there, then you've just made a difference in the lives of so many children. So we knew that would, if we were able to pull it off, that would have been a really grand victory for us. And unfortunately, that state house is just not quite there yet. But we're going to keep working towards it in Texas, and we're going to keep fighting for it in New Mexico as well. And like I said, we will certainly, if we feel like Sarah Jane's voice can lend help to any other states and places, then we'll be certain to bring her there too. And I guess the one advantage that the Viante Foundation has is just given the fact that my old background was with the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. I'm a little plugged in with some of the other conservative groups in DC too. So we sort of have been able to provide a little bit of an echo chamber for some of our stuff. Accuracy in Media was another group that pushed out Sarah Jane. So we're happy to lend her star power to help children wherever we can in this country.
All right. Well, how do people find out more about Viante Foundation?
Yes, please go to viantefoundation.org, sign up for our mailing list, and we'd absolutely hope that you'll stay up to date on our continued work, both in the transparency space as well as in school choice and our program that we're lifting off soon to promote entrepreneurship and more economic opportunity.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today, John Decker. We look forward to working with you and hearing more about the resolution of this Attorney General issue with the transparency and these these contingency contracts. So thanks for bringing it to the public's attention and for my attention, and thanks for the conversation.
Thank you so much, Paul. I greatly appreciate it.
Take care. All right. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointsnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or tell Google Home to play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.